As we start a new year, I wanted to reflect on the technology change that we saw in 2022 and give a little bit of thought as to what I'm expecting to see make the headlines over the next 12 months. So 2022, definitely a year where the metaverse hit the top of the hype curve. For me, it's a technology that's still not got a really compelling use case, and indeed lacks a consistent definition in many ways. We understand it's a 3D internet, but does it have to be decentralized? Does it have to have a single personality that can be transferred with assets across 3D environments? There's a lot of confusion around that definition that still needs to be sorted out before those super compelling use cases can be developed. We also saw crypto crash in a massive way, and if crypto is going to form the platform on which Web3 and a future metaverse are built, there's an awful lot of sorting out that's going to happen over the next 12 months in terms of reliability and trust in the crypto space being rebuilt before those technologies can take off. 2022 was definitely a year where AI matured in a massive way. From some of the early work that was done on the Google Chinchilla paper around the benefits of greater training data, through to the incredible results that we saw with image generation technologies in the middle of the year, DALL-E 2, Imogen, Stable Diffusion and Midjourney being the most notable examples that have captured the imagination and have seen an awful lot of AI-powered image generation technologies hitting the news for various different reasons. Some good in terms of the quality of the output, some more dubious in terms of the impact on the livelihoods of artists. ChatGPT has got to be the big AI story of the latter part of the year, though. The impact of that system, released only just over a month ago as I'm talking in late November, it's captured an enormous amount of news coverage, and the potential for that kind of chat interface on a natural language processing system, a large pre-trained model like GPT-3, is absolutely enormous potential. And certainly that's an area where I expect there to be an enormous amount of development over the next 12 months. From a legal perspective, there's been the inevitable array of new regulations on data and various different claims in the IP space. The two things that have stood out for me from an interesting legal development point of view have been, number one, the continued journey of AI-specific regulation through in various different places. The EU's AI Act, obviously having reached a point where it's now entering trilogues, and a draft that we can effectively start to build towards is already available. That's something where companies who are early with their compliance journeys are seeing a real advantage from getting on board with that. The other thing that I expect to have a bigger impact in the hardware technology space has been the tightening of the export control laws, particularly around high-end silicon products from Western jurisdictions, and the impact that that might have on the race for development of the highest end technologies, and China's need to sort of start to potentially build its own capability in that space if it's suddenly finding that the taps are being turned off from Western technology providers in that space. So what for the next 12 months? That NLP technology that I mentioned, that's going to be enormous. I'd expect to see competing chat style interfaces for other large pre-trained models, things like Eleuther AI's Neo 20B. If we expect to see a chat interface around something like that on an open sourced basis, so that people can potentially start to run their own instances of those technologies, that will have a huge impact. I'd also expect to see the big technology providers start to really radically transform what they do in terms of business process outsourcing solutions by deploying a lot of those NLP technologies in order to make those radically more efficient, radically more performant than even the systems that they've been capable of building using earlier technologies have been. I'd expect to see that federated technologies will suddenly take on a new importance. We saw massive upset in the social media space in 2022, in particular the number of people who chose to leave Twitter and move over to federated platforms like Mastodon because they didn't agree with ownership decisions that were being taken at the centrally owned social media networks. So that kind of move towards federated technologies may well be the start of a federated beginnings of a federated metaverse as well. If we do see a federated system of 3D worlds starting to build up along the same lines as the sort of federated social media networks that already exist, that will be an interesting development on that side. I also think we might see, on a hardware perspective, the metaverse actually have its iPhone moment. At the moment, headsets still tend to be large, cumbersome devices for the most part, and block off the user substantially from the real world. There's certainly an opportunity for there to be a radical change in the ease of access to hardware and the ease with which that hardware interfaces with people. And there are some big announcements expected in 2023 from some of the consumer electronics brands, so let's see what they bring. And we may well see, in exactly the same way as the iPhone brought a paradigm shift in what it meant to have a smartphone, this new technology may well be the paradigm shift in what it means to have a VR headset. I also think that from a silicon perspective, we are going to see a continuing explosion of innovation in the hardware space, AI accelerator hardware. Companies like Graphcore have already said that they're on a journey to building a brain scale AI hardware using, in their case, their IPU technology. Others are looking at neuromorphic AI technologies that mimic the functioning of the brain itself, with sort of spiking non-clocked pathways of processing through the chips, things like BrainChip's Akida, Intel's Loihi processors. Those are things to watch out for on the hardware side in 2023. And also I think that the interest in the RISC-V architecture, especially for AI edge devices, will continue to be an enormous area of innovation. And again, I think that plays into the fact that we're likely to see a lot of interest in that space from China, just because that's an open sourced architecture, and some of the controls that might exist for more proprietary technologies won't necessarily prevent innovation in that space. So again, I'd really concentrate quite heavily on what the innovation is happening in RISC-V from a processor space. Let's see how it turns out. We've got 12 months to see whether or not I'm right in all of those things. And I'd love to hear from others to see what they think is going to be happening in the technology space in 2023 as well. Whatever happens, have a great year.